Hello, and welcome back to the Bench to Boardroom podcast. I am your host, Cynthia Steele, and today's guest is a good friend of mine, Dr. Andrea Unser from Humonix Biosciences. You have heard about Humonix before because their chief scientific officer, Dr. Karen Torrejon, was our guest on episode 4. So Andrea's job at Humonix is as a senior research scientist. She's been with the company since its very, very beginning. And so we talk a lot about the importance of flexibility in startup culture and how scientists, especially bench scientists, are particularly good at flexibility because you have to be, right? So Andrea is born and raised in Albany, New York, and her PhD is in nanoscale engineering, which she got from SUNY in Albany. And what's really great about Andrea's story is that it grows organically. You know, she wasn't necessarily someone who was born to a pair of scientists and just knew this is what she was going to do with her life. She figured out in high school that she was very good at chemistry, and she started college as an undeclared major, enjoyed her chemistry classes, except organic chemistry, which she and I can agree on. Organic chemistry is awful. But she continued to take chemistry classes until at some point her advisor was like, "You're a chemistry major, right?" And so she became a biochemistry major. And then she ended up taking a leap of faith and joined the nanoscale science program, where she ended up getting a master's and then eventually a PhD in that program. And I think, as many of you can imagine, that was a very heavily male dominated field. And she talks about how she remembers hearing some of her classmates saying, "Wow, we never see any women around here," you know, but also from the perspective of someone who is interested in chemistry, but maybe not to the scale that some of these other folks, particularly in the engineering program, thought. So she took this massive leap of faith, and it ended up serving her incredibly well in her career. So we talk about the importance of taking those leaps of faith. We talk about being willing to deviate from plan. Scientists are very big planners, and so we talk about how sometimes deviating from plan can actually be the best thing that ever happened to you. And then we talk about the importance of learning as many techniques as you can while you're in school or while you're in training. But even more importantly than that, we talk about the importance of being able to communicate those techniques, because communication is a good indicator of your comprehension of the things that you're doing. So I hope you enjoy my conversation with Dr. Andrea Unser. Dr. Andrea Unser, welcome to Bench to Boardroom.
Thank you for having me, Cynthia. I'm so excited to be here.
I am so excited to have you here. So why don't you introduce yourself to the audience?
Absolutely. So I'm Dr. Andrea Unser, as Cynthia said. I'm a senior research scientist at Humonix Biosciences, formerly Humonix Biosciences. I'm a biochemist, sort of by training. That's what my bachelor's degree is in. And then I have a master's of nanoscale science and a PhD of nanoscale science. And I also really love podcasts, so this is very exciting for me.
I think all bench scientists love podcasts, right? We have to have something going in our ears as we're working, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially, I do a lot of confocal, as we'll talk about, and so I really love it when I'm doing confocal. So, yeah.
Makes the time go by faster.
Yes.
So I guess I wanted to ask you, you were born and raised in Albany, and where did the interest in science really come from?
You know, a lot of my story, and as you will learn, is pretty organic.
Yeah.
There was no like, I mean, actually, no, now that I say that, when I was little, now that I think back, I used to like, this is really funny. I used to like take lotions and like my mom's spices and stuff and mix them together like in the sink. I had no, just for fun. I used to just like mix stuff, like random stuff. Um, I didn't know why. I just like to do it. It was really funny, and they let me go.
Hmm?
And so I think I just was really like curious about how things worked.
Yeah,
And then when I was in high school and you have to take like chemistry as part of the high
sure.
school curriculum, I was really good at it, really good, and I really understood it. It was like really strange. It was just like one of those things that just made sense to me. And so I was like, oh, this is great. And then when I decided to stay local, I was undeclared at St. Rose.
Mhm.
And because I've always really liked all subjects. I've never like I was really good at science, but I liked other things. I liked everything,
Okay.
and I didn't have a clear path. So
Mhm.
I was undeclared, and because of my high school background, they put me in a Gen Chem 1 class as an undergrad. And so I was like, all right, this is cool. I like this. So then I just kept taking like, okay, Gen Chem 2, okay, Orgo 1, okay. So it kind of just, by the time I was a junior, my academic advisor was like, so what are you going to do here? And I was like, well, I think at this point I should just declare biochem. I have all of these, I have all the classes. And it just kind of happened.
Wow,
So yeah,
that's awesome.
yeah. And my
That's awesome.
parents are not scientists or anything like that. Like it's not like a family thing. It's just me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
It's funny that you say that because like my parents aren't scientists either.
Okay.
Actually, correction. My mom was a chemistry teacher back in Europe, but when they came to America, there was the language barrier and everything else, and so she just kind of did
Oh,
little odd jobs and stuff. She did like data entry, and she became a seamstress because she is an incredible sewer.
oh, that's
So she
amazing.
she did a lot of like just blue collar part time jobs while we were little kids, and then my dad was a welder, so there
Oh,
was really
wow.
no so there was no, I agree with you, same thing. There was just no like scientific background necessarily, but kudos to you for chemistry making sense because it was like that I think I blacked out for organic chemistry. Like
Oh,
I
organic chemistry, no.
mm,
No. Oh,
mm.
no. Mm-mm. No, Gen Chem, yes. Orgo,
Okay.
no way. Yeah.
Okay. Was it the different the L and D formations, the right hand rule that also got you, or what was it?
It was all of yeah, and my teacher was very how do I he did not want to teach, right? He wanted to do his
Mm,
research. He was
mhm,
very
mhm.
much your stereotypical scientist. I would rather not speak to you. I really just want to do what I'm here to do for myself, but
Oh,
I have to speak to you. So
okay.
it was not a good interaction. I mean, I've had friends who have had really good teachers for Orgo and they really like it. So it's like, and my academic advisor would say, well, when you go to graduate school, organic chemistry will make sense. And I was like, okay, we'll see. Did not.
Did did you use it again in
No,
graduate school?
mm-mm. No, not at all. Not at all. And I had so many resources too, right? Like I had so many friends who could help me. And I
Yeah.
just was like, I cannot, it's too abstract. So I'm with you there.
Well, and also you have a Merck index. You have
Right.
ways to look these things up. You don't have to memorize how everything is going to react with everything else. And that was
Mhm.
the part that drove me crazy. My organic chemistry professor would say things like, if you're stuck on a desert island and you have these reagents and a centrifuge, I was
Oh
always
my
like,
God.
why would I be doing chemistry? Why would I not be trying to get off the island? Like, I don't know. I think I'm with you that my teacher was an adjunct, and I mean I've been an adjunct. I respect the heck out of anyone willing to do that job.
Yes.
I just think I apparently the regular organic chemistry professor was really good at his job, and he was really good at explaining. And I think this guy had like one or two ways to explain it, but I don't think he knew how to deal with like hopeless cases like myself. He was like, I don't know what to do with you. I can't explain it any other way.
Yeah,
But
exactly. Yeah, it
then,
was so bad.
oh,
But we made
okay,
it through. Yeah.
okay. And I agree with you. Biochem I liked because it was just a phosphorylation event. And that's
Ex-
that. It wasn't, where do the electrons go and where is it going to bind and
mhm.
how is the compound going to change orientation? Like, no, just draw a little P in a circle and move on. And I was like, I can do this.
Yeah, and it was like this is how like the body like it was practical. You can like your
Yes.
body's doing all of these things to make sure that
Hmm.
you can be a person. And so I think
Yeah.
that practicality helps too. Yeah.
And I think it's so interesting that you say that because we're going to talk about nanoscale engineering now. And I talk to when I talk about myself, I say like I was an anatomist and a cell biologist. Like anything smaller than that, and it starts getting into like a gray fuzzy zone,
Right.
especially when we get down to like molecular level interactions and anything smaller than that, and I'm like, nope, I check out. So you say that, but then you went into nanoscale engineering. So
Well,
how did that come about?
well,
How did you go smaller?
let me tell you. I
Yes.
mean, in all honesty, I graduated from college in 2009. And if you can
Mhm.
remember, the economy in 2009 was not great.
That's true.
So,
That's true.
what am I going to do? Right. Was really done with school.
There
I
was
was
not a
a
whole lot
very
going on.
hardcore
So,
academic, through high
my
school, through
genetics
college.
professor, who
I
I
did
really
really well.
liked,
I
she
was
was like, listen,
tired. I was
you
really
go to grad
tired.
school, you should not have to
I
pay a
wanted a
dime,
job. I wanted to
especially
work.
in
I wanted
this
to make money
field,
like my
apply for
friends, and I wanted
fellowships,
to live my life.
apply for all of these
With
things,
the
and they
degree
will
that I
pay you
had at the
money to go to
time,
school.
it
Okay.
was so I was like, I'll go that route. Took the GRE, I did all the things. I applied to a few different schools. Locally, I was really interested in pharmacology, actually, which is, I kind of wanted to be a pharmacist for a minute. And I worked in a pharmacy as an undergrad, and I realized what they did, and it was a lot of talking to insurance companies. So I was I was interested in pharmacology. So, I had applied for a few programs. We have a pharmacy school in Albany. And I had applied there, and I'd gotten in there, and I had applied to Union, which is another local college, and the School of Public Health. And I
Mm,
got into all of them. And my dad was like, so this, you've never been here, but this building that we're in, and I'll have to send you a photo. It's
yeah.
a very unique looking building. It's been here since I was younger, and it looks like a ship. And
Ooh.
my dad said, Andrea, it looks like they've got a lot going on in that cool building that's been around. Why don't you like apply over there? It was totally on a whim. I was like, okay, I don't know about
Mm,
anything about nano. So I applied and I got in, and they offered me the most money. They were like, we will
nice.
give you, yeah, it was great. I was like, oh, I could actually like not have to have another job. And I will like see what's all going on, right? And it was kind of
Mhm.
it was a leap of faith because I do not have a semiconductor background. I do not have that kind of, my brain doesn't really work that way. So it was a leap of faith, and I took it. And luckily at the time, the professors were reaching out to students in advance. They were like, I really like your background. I think you'd fit really well in my lab. Let's talk. Yu
Wow.
Bing, who was also one of Karen's advisors, scooped me up. And she was a
Mhm.
chemical engineer by training, but was working on a lot of bioengineering models and needed some more students in that space. So I quickly just joined on with her. So when the nano piece kind of happened because I
Mhm.
was here, but it was a challenge for me. I will tell you. I mean, they put you in like crystallinity, like your first semester, and it's a very different way of thinking, and it's very abstract. Um,
Mm,
and I always, used to say when I would present, and a lot of the engineering students would, have questions or like have interesting comments, I would say, well, bio was nano before man even got there. Because, if you think
ah,
about the body, right, and all that's going on, I mean, at the molecular level, you have those interactions happening. And so, semiconductors, I know there's like a lot of money, and they're
mhm.
doing all these great things. But I always used to say, well, we happened first, and we just happened naturally. Um,
Wow.
so it just kind of happened organically, and I didn't put thought into the nano part. I was more like, how can I use my biochemistry skills to help make these three-dimensional models? And that started in graduate school. Yeah. So there
Wow.
you go. If they had a nanobio degree, that's what I would have, but they didn't have that option. It was nanoscale science or nanoscale engineering.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is incredibly cool. And I think let me ask you, did your fellow students kind of appreciate your perspective coming at it from the biology side versus coming at it from more of an engineering nanoscale side? Like were you guys able to mesh pretty well?
We were for the most part, yeah. And in the lab that I worked in, there was two PIs sharing one lab. So you can only imagine the mess that lab was.
Gosh.
But most of us were working toward like on similar things, and a lot of us appreciated biology, or some of them were even engineers who were now training in biotechniques to make these models happen. So it was a very interdisciplinary. Of course, you had a few, you know, who were purely, I'm, an engineer, and we didn't really interact as much, but that was more during, we had to do like these like Saturday seminars, and we had to present our work, and like those interactions happened then a little bit more, but it was very interdisciplinary, and I was very lucky in that way, to have that kind of, I guess, different experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because, I think back to the number of times, and I've been this person too, to say, this is not my area of expertise. This is not my background. Please catch me up, and I say, talking about insurance companies before, I used to say this all the time when I was in pharma and I had to deal with insurance companies. I would say, okay, explain this to me like I'm 5.
Yeah.
Why? Or like I'm a high school freshman. What are we doing? What is this policy? What is this legalese paragraph? What does it say? And so I think in cases like yours, or in cases like, I'm sure we've both gone to meetings where there's definitely parts that are over our head. And we said, look, explain this to me. How does this work? And then usually it's that outside perspective that actually ends up bringing in something new and exciting to this other person's way of thinking, because you're able to bring kind of that proverbial 30,000-foot view.
Absolutely. And I think, I think you would agree. One of the biggest things I learned in graduate school is that it's okay to say, I don't know. Don't try to reinvent the wheel, right? Just say, I don't know this. You cannot know everything. So
Yes.
I completely agree with that.
And that's a reminder to the trainees out there. It is okay, and in fact, it is encouraged to say, I don't know.
Yep.
And if you do get a job in industry, that will suit you better if you say, I don't know, I'm going to look it up and I'll get back to you, rather than making something up on the spot that could get you in trouble later.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Yes.
So while you're working, I ask everyone this question. So while you're working on, on your dissertation, and you're finishing your master's, what was your just forget this, I'm done, give it all up and run away dream job?
It's funny when I read that question, and I didn't have one specific job. I was so done and so
Yeah.
tired. I just wanted a job where I could go to the job and I could go home, and that was it. And I was done. I was like, I had a friend at the time who was like working for her parents, like oil, like not oil company, but I don't know, whatever company they had. And like she could just go and like bring her dog and then like do her job work and like go home. And I'm like, I was so jealous of that. So there wasn't like one thing. I mean, I always, when I was in high school, I was like, oh, it'd be cool to like run a hotel and like live in the hotel. And you've seen those movies, I'm
Yeah.
sure.
Sure.
But there was never one thing. I just loved so many things. And I did a lot of volunteering when I was a graduate student. I had that opportunity. I had a lot of those opportunities, and I really enjoyed that as well. So I don't know. Yeah, I wanted a job that was just a 9 to 5 job, and I could go home. Yeah.
It's so funny to think that, like, you craved the mundane.
I did.
I want to be stuck in traffic, and I want to just sit at a desk and then go home.
And go home. Yeah, that at that time, that's exactly what I thought I wanted. Yes. Yes.
I absolutely love that, because when you think about the number of people who have that job and they're like, oh my God, I could have gone into science. I could have gone into, we always want what we don't have, but oh my God,
Exactly.
that's hysterical.
That's it.
9
Yeah.
a.m., gray box, 5 p.m., home.
Exactly. Exactly what I wanted. Yep.
I love that. I absolutely love that. So was it that made you decide that you wanted to maybe pursue a career in industry rather than academia, or was that something that you just kind of always knew you weren't gonna have your own lab?
Yeah, I knew. I saw my PI. I mean, the thing is, she had a very, it seemed like flexible life. I mean, she had two boys actually. So when I had started, she had two young boys, and like just seeing how she made it all work. I mean, she was so good to all of us, and then she was clearly like a great mom, and but I also knew that she was up all hours of the night trying to get her grants in, or like do, whatever she needed to do. And then it was a lot. I mean, I could just see, trying to manage other young students and dealing with that. And then also having to teach classes. And then we had the undergraduate program come in. So then there was that layer too. And I was like, I just can't, I don't think I could, that's for me. I would have loved to have like maybe later in life go teach and like purely just teach, not have to run a lab or do any of that. And, in fact, when I was in graduate school, I was offered an adjunct. I was offered to teach a course at St. Rose. One of my professors was like, would you come do this? And as you can appreciate, for the money that it is and for the time that it is, I was like, I cannot do this, but like something like that when I'm later would be great. But for again, that I want a 9 to 5, but I knew when I was leaving grad school, you're not going to have that. There are going to be things that you're going to have to take care of. And I understood that. And I came around to that. And I definitely was like, interested in industry more. But I was also like, should I do an industry postdoc or something like that? But then when I was about to graduate, my PI and another PI were like, hey, we could use some help. You want to hang on and work in our labs, both labs at the same time. And
oh, wow.
So I had to sort of split my time, but I learned a lot of new techniques, especially working in the other lab. I was exposed to more, bacteria and calcium channels and things like that. And so I was like, why not? I'll do this while I look for, my ideal job. Right. And then another PI was like, hey, I also need some help. Yeah. So my original PI's money ran out. So then I split my time between the other guy and this guy. And again, learned a bunch of stuff. He was more of an RNA person. So I was like, okay, I'll learn some more stuff and I'll just keep applying and keep doing things. And, and not to make this super sad, but my mom unfortunately got sick before I graduated. And so I was interested to leave Albany, if you can believe it. But when that happened, I just felt like I had to be here. So, I was still applying to jobs that were not super far, but I was really trying to stay as close as I could at the time.
Yeah.
So
that makes sense.
Yeah. So then Karen was like, hey, I have my lab. I really need somebody else who knows how to do cell culture and tissue engineering and all of the things. I have Farion, but he's more strictly chemistry and he can do all of this, but I really just need another set of hands because I would like to go home for Thanksgiving sometime. She was working like a dog, right? As you can imagine.
Yeah, I'm sure.
She needed help. So I was like, why not? I have no kids. I have no house. Let's do this and I'll get my industry experience. And then that could get me in the door for another company, right? So yes. So long answer is yes, I knew that I did not want to be a PI. And then by sticking it out a little bit, here I am. And it's been 7 years, I think. 8 years, I don't know. 8 years, 7 or 8 years now. Yeah.
Awesome. That is amazing.
Yeah.
So Karen, meaning Dr. Karen Torrejon, who has been
Dr.
one of
Karen,
my previous guests. No, that's okay.
Yes.
We're just talking amongst friends. And so did you guys know each other in grad school, or was she just kind of? Oh yeah. Oh, I didn't know that.
So Karen came to us. I started before Karen. She came to us the summer before she was to start in the fall, and she was so eager. And she was just like, oh my God, tell me all the things. And I, at the time, was studying for my quals. So I had to also study for my written qual, and then, just talk to her about what I was doing in the lab. And she was just so excited. She had so much energy. And, and I'm a very personable person. And I'm asking more about her as a person, hey, how are you? Tell me about yourself. And, do you have a boyfriend? And she was just like, I am not here for that. I am here for science. I'm here to work. And I was like, okay, that's cool. So
you're a little intense.
Yeah, she was just, and she had the right to be that way. She is an all-star undergrad. She was excited. She was just really into science. And so I showed her a bunch of stuff that we were doing. and she wound up coming on under my PI, partially my PI and partially another PI. And
Wow.
so we became friends and
Mhm.
like we just had a relationship. Yeah. Yeah,
I
she
love
was
that.
great. Yeah, it was wonderful.
I love this because I keep coming back to this idea that the people that I knew in school and the people that you knew in school, I mean, now they are legit bigwigs,
Hmm.
and you just never know. And one of my, I mean, what my favorite story is my friend Sarah Starkey, who is the vice president of neuroscience and vaccines at Takeda, but we were broke grad students together. We would,
Yep.
we'd sneak food into our bags at the buffet so that way we could have dinner that night. You know what I mean? Like we were so broke. We were so like just jaded by everything. And now like I look at her and I'm like, dude, I mean, it blows my mind, and I love to emphasize that, that the people that you work with and the people that you study with and everything, you just never know
Right. You don't.
where they're going to end up. And if you're lucky enough, maybe you'll stay friends forever and you'll work together and build something incredible together. I love this.
It's two things here. We used to bring Tupper. I don't know if Karen did this, but a lot of us grad students used to bring Tupperware. They used to have big parties here, and we would
Hmm.
we would bring Tupperware so that we could take the food back with us. So that's really funny that you said that. And
Yeah.
then, yes, it is. And my RPI's dream was for Karen to just hire all of us.
Aw,
We had a very close-knit group under RPI,
yeah.
and she was like, that was like her dream. She just was like,
Mm,
okay, everybody can just work for Glauconics at the time.
yeah.
So yes, it is. It's really sweet, and we really work well off of each other,
Yeah.
which is great. I don't know.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's been wonderful. Nothing but good things to say.
There was last story about this, but it's still even my husband knows this story. I used to teach neuroscience journal clubs, me and
Oh,
this other PI. And so once a week we'd get together and one of the students would pick an article and we'd all have to read it and then go through and discuss. And to kind of bring everybody in, I would always have to order, and thankfully the department would pay for it, but I would always get two football sized pizzas. That's what they were called. So they were like, huge pizzas, and like a 2 liter of Coke or Sprite or something, and bring them in. And so it was always like one giant like pepperoni or sausage, and then one like half cheese, half veggie. And they go around and the kids would eat and everything. And then at the end, this kid, and God help him, he's an MD PhD now. And if you're out there, Vince, I still remember you. Vince would take all of the leftover pizza. I mean, like he'd pile it on like a Dagwood sandwich. It was this huge pile of pizza, and and he'd take it all home with him.
what?
And
Oh
I
my
would
God.
say to him, like, Vince, come on, dude, like. Have a little shame. Like, do you have any, like, come on, like, why don't you just bring that back upstairs where all the labs are and share it with everybody? And he was like, well, no, I ask and no one else wants it. And, I share some with the homeless guy outside my apartment,
Oh,
and I'm sure he did. He was a very sweet kid, but it always, every time I would see him like walk away with a stack of pizza slices, all I could think of was like, one day that kid's going to do something incredible. And I'm going to
right.
be able to tell the story about how he's going to cure some kind of a brain tumor, and I'm going to tell the story about how he used to steal all the free pizza from Neuroscience Journal Club because he was so broke. That's the nature of the beast.
I love that. And it is the nature of the beast. We're all just trying to survive, you
Yeah,
know? Back to
totally.
the desert island question. We're more
Yes,
interested in surviving, okay?
I know, exactly. So then, what do you say to people? So going back to Albany, obviously, so you grew up in this area where obviously
Mhm.
there was a lot of technical advancements, and sounds like there's a lot of really good universities and
Yeah.
opportunities there. From talking to Karen, she said she thankfully didn't really have much of a problem extracting her IP from the university and starting her company. So it sounds like this is incredibly supportive environment. But even someone like me who grew up in Chicago, where there's like 6 incredible research universities,
Right.
we were always told not to geographically restrict ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, I mean, at the time I resented it completely because, like I kind of wanted to stay closer to home. I was dating my high school sweetheart. I had, my whole family was in the
Mm-hmm.
Chicagoland area. I had no interest in leaving. But, everybody told me, don't geographically restrict yourself. And in retrospect, I can see what they mean because it's not just about going to another lab and learning new techniques. It's about like gaining some independence and other world
Right.
experiences and, completely being on your own and things like that. But you are obviously this fantastic success story of someone who never really left. And so I guess like, what would be your counterpoint to that? If someone says don't geographically restrict yourself, what would you say?
I understand it, and they told me that too. Trust me, they
Mhm.
told me that too.
Okay.
Um, and I just was like, well, I hear you, and maybe that will happen for me, but for now,
Yeah,
this feels right, and I am gonna see where this goes. Like that's kind of how it's always been. I'm just gonna see where this goes.
yeah,
I also was dating my high school sweetheart, and we have 2 kids now. So,
yeah. Yeah, yours worked out.
yes, mine worked out. Which I know is rare. So I'm not like trying to be the poster child for that either. But yeah, and I also I think that it's important. I think you should consider everything, but I also think you have to follow what makes sense for you and what makes sense for what you're interested in, right? Like
Mhm.
I was really interested in the things that I was doing here, and I was like, well, I don't want to leave. I don't want to abandon these things that I'm
Yeah,
working on here. And I kind of just followed my gut, if that makes any sense to you. Um, and
totally.
I made sure I was out there in conferences, and also I was on my own. I wasn't like living with my parents. I was on my own. Even as an undergrad, I moved out and I was on my own. So I had a lot of independence. So I understand it. I think it is, maybe someday I will relocate.
Yeah,
But for me, you just have to follow your gut and trust what you're interested in and trust the process and that you're going to wind up where you need to be. It's really nothing
yeah,
magical about it. Yeah.
yeah. I agree with that. I completely agree with that.
Yeah.
So for people who are interested in pursuing bench careers after, maybe after they're done with their PhD, you mentioned, working for a few different people at the same time and learning all of these different techniques. Do you think that helped you
Oh, yeah.
in what you do now? And then, like, I guess my question would be, for those people who are interested in continuing on at the bench, but just in an industry perspective, what would you recommend? Would you recommend that they do that, or what would you recommend that they do to kind of help prepare them for that type of
Yeah,
career path?
absolutely. And I want to I want to clarify. So I did start more at the bench purely.
Hmm.
Now I'm more of in a supervisory position where I focus more on planning out, projects and experiments. And I do step in where I need to. I do a lot of microscopy because that's, one of my specialties. But it was very important for me to have those other lab experiences and to learn those other techniques. I think that was really great. I would say, this is something I wish I had done as
Okay.
a graduate student. I wish I had done more internships because I think those are really important for you to pick up on these new skills or what have you. And obviously as a grad student, you're focused on getting your work done in the summer. I mean, you don't have the summer off. And I also was like trying to make money, with other jobs, but I think it would have been really great if I could have gone to an industry internship or some other internship. So I would say internships and getting as much experience in other labs as you can, whether even
Hmm.
if that's like a shadowing experience, whatever you can do.
Hmm.
Yeah.
To gain these other perspectives and learn some of these other techniques and
Yep. Absolutely.
wow, okay. That's really good. That's really good to know because I don't even think I ever considered doing an internship in school. It was more,
I know.
let's get this done.
Exactly. And I had some friends who were doing that.
Mhm.
They would do like these internships and try to make it all work, And even as an undergrad, if you're at that level, right? Because maybe some people
Yeah.
are at that level, just get out there as much as you can. It's really scary, but it's really important. And you'll also meet a lot of great people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So is that what you look for in like resumes and people that you interview for positions at Humonix? So what is it that you look for in as you're going through applicants, and how can someone stand out to you?
Absolutely. It's funny that you say that. I don't know if I think that's important. That's one of the things I look for. Yes. The first thing I'm looking for is their relevant experience to what we're doing, right? So, various bioanalyses, cell culture techniques, things like that. And how they can explain what they've done to me effectively, because
Mm,
that's really important. My advisor had always, pushed, if you can't explain what you're doing in an elevator pitch, then you don't know what you're doing. It's really important. So I'm looking for that relevant experience. I'm looking for them to be able to explain that to me
mhm.
effectively. I'm also looking for other experience that we don't have, because again, I was brought up in this interdisciplinary way, and sometimes, as we mentioned earlier, it's that other field or other area of expertise that can kind of bring a lot to the table. I think that adds value. So I'm also looking for, okay, what other experience do you have, and how could that benefit Humonix, particularly in developing new models, right? Especially
Sure.
for this alternative methods initiative. And
Mhm.
then, um, so with those two things, and then the communication is really important. But also, I'm looking for somebody who can not only work with a team, but not on a team, but with a team, right? And their communication skills come in there too, right? You need to be able to say, I don't know. You need to be able to ask questions and not be afraid. There's no room for shrinking violets here. Um, and I think that kind of would go for a lot of industry, right? Unless you're in like
Yeah.
a trainee type of position. Um, I'm also trying to look for people who um, are a little bit well-rounded. You know what I mean? Like, tell me about
Mhm.
your interests, or tell me about things that you asked. What was your like job that you would have run away from, or run away for,
Yeah.
not run away
Yeah.
from, things like that. And then something that's very important to working in industry, is particularly, in a startup environment, is flexibility. We have
Right.
an ever-changing dynamic, ever-changing environment. We're at the mercy of things that are alive, and we have to be able to pivot. We have to be able to pivot and move on. And,
Mhm.
we can't get stuck on something. So I'm looking for that. I'm looking for flexibility. Sometimes we have to come in at night and on the weekends.
Mhm.
So I think that's really important. I'm lucky enough to be a part of a great, dynamic team here. We all add different pieces to the puzzle, and so yeah, it's a lot of different things that we're looking for. But I think the internships and other experiences absolutely would help.
I love how you said you have to be able to explain what you do, and I love this elevator pitch
Hmm.
idea, because one of the things that my mentor used to tell me when he would interview students for the program is he would ask them about some of the manuscripts that they were listed on. Or, he would look through their CV and either pick a manuscript or pick an abstract, and he would say, "All right, what did you do on
Right.
that paper? Tell me what that paper was about. Tell me and tell me what you did." And, he kind of did that in a way as like a little bit of a gotcha, because,
Hmm.
there are those, I don't know if they're still called like paper farms or something, but like those huge labs where everyone's put on all the papers, and,
Yep.
maybe you just reviewed it, or maybe you did some very small component of it, and you're listed on the paper, which is, advantageous. It grows your CV exponentially. But that being said, if someone ever asks you, what was that paper about, or what assay did you do, you know, you have to be able to tell them. We
Exactly.
were always taught, if it's on your slide, you're responsible for knowing it. So,
Hmm.
even in your background slides, there's no throwaway bullet points. Someone could come back and ask
Hmm.
you about that bullet point. You better be able to say at least something, and
Yes.
I love this idea, because I'm sure you guys aren't necessarily doing it as a gotcha, but it's more as a,
Right.
let's, what's your comprehension
Hmm.
of immunohistochemistry? What's your comprehension of this model that you were building? Why were you building this model? Why does that cell type important to that disease state or whatever it is? I think that's wonderful.
Absolutely. Yeah, it is. And I really like that you said that. That's a really actually I kind of like what he used to do. That's a really interesting technique. I mean, and it makes perfect sense. And and in my experience, I mean, probably because I've been part of like smaller labs and things, it's like unless you've done something to contribute to that paper, like you are not on it. So
Yeah, totally.
it's very important. Yeah.
And I think he would only look for those who obviously as an undergrad were on like a large number of papers, and
Yeah.
say, really? All right, let's
Is this
what were you
real?
doing here?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly. I mean, yeah, it's real in that it's black and white, but I mean, what exactly did you do here?
Hmm.
And how and I like the idea of pivoting as well because I worked at a startup. I worked at a company that had very startup mentality, and yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think lab people actually are better at this. Yeah, I'm just gonna go out and say I think lab people are better at this than the mundane 9 to 5 people because even now in the job that I do, I will still answer emails at 9:30 at night. It does not faze me.
Hmm. Absolutely.
It is what it is. But the 9 to 5 people, and in fact, it's funny. Someone said, "Oh, we're not supposed to work on weekends," and I'm like, I mean, I appreciate that, but there's an email here, and I'm going to answer it now. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So I think lab people are better at understanding that sometimes the -80 breaks down on Saturday night and you've got to abandon your plans and go take care of it. Or your 12-hour time point just happens to be at, at midnight. So you go,
Yep.
it's just what you do. So
Exactly. Exactly.
actually, so it's good for students to know that that doesn't necessarily end when you're
Oh,
in grad school. When you finish grad school, it doesn't necessarily. You might still have those late nights. You may still work on weekends. It'll still happen.
it will, and it may not be as often, right? It may not be, it's
Sure,
not super
absolutely.
frequent. You kind of
Mhm.
just ebb and flow as things go. But yeah, I mean, if you're working with cells in particular and
Yep.
experiments, you have to be at the mercy of what that is if you want good science.
Hmm. And the experiment that you did for the startup company I used to work at, you were checking in on Christmas Eve, right? You were checking on those cells. It was during Christmas break. I remember.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And one of the benefits of me being from here is that I'm here usually. So, and I have a very short commute
Mm,
to this facility. So,
oh, good.
it really all worked out.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Perfect. Um, So I guess yeah, let's talk about what a typical week
Yeah.
is like for you.
Mhm.
So we're just talking about being flexible and everything, but like I guess if you had to sum up like a typical week as someone who supervises bench scientists, what does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, I think what would be most beneficial is I'll probably walk you through the bulk part of my job.
Mhm.
As I wear many hats here, but the no day's the same, right? First off, which is great. I kind of like that now. I wanted
Yeah.
mundane, but I like that no day is the
Yeah.
same. So the main component of my job is client services and experimental planning. And so, say we get a statement of work that's been signed. I take the statement of work. I then plan it all out, soup to nuts, and we have a task manager that we use that's wonderful. So once I have planned it and I talk with the other scientists and our technical team,
Mhm.
again, constant communication, that's a theme that you're going to see throughout this. I upload it to our task manager and make sure everything is detailed and pristine, because
I'm in
that has
constant
all of our
conversation with the
projects
technical
in our
team
day
because
to
they're the
day.
ones, doing a lot of the hands-on work.
I then
But
communicate with the
I'm in
clients.
there looking
This
at
is
the
the
cells. Are
timeline.
they looking as they should? Or,
This is what we're
is everything
thinking.
growing the way it
Okay,
needs to
and
grow?
then
If
we're off
it's
to the
not, I
races.
then have to pivot
From that
and
point
either,
on,
change
once it starts to be
accordingly.
like, do they need more time? Is this particular vial's not working? We need to rework this. So, again, dynamic environment. So I'm in the lab. I'm looking at that. I'm also, depending on what the endpoint is, I'll come on to do some assays, a lot of confocal microscopy. I really enjoy that. And then we, wrap everything up, do analysis, and then have the meeting with the client. And I really like having those face-to-face meetings with the client because, I'm a people person. I do like talking to people, and we really like to think of our clients more as partners and collaborators, and building relationships with them is important to me, and really understanding what it is that their objective is. So, you know, I do a lot of that. And then aside from my priorities, in the client space, I am also involved in internal work that we have going on. So, and I kind of pinch hit wherever I'm needed, whether that be, planning, calculations, microscopy, assays, whatever the thing is. I'm in that as well. So, again, you can see as my days are never the same, but again,
Yeah.
big portion is really client services and constantly being in communication with the technical team. I mean, we work hand in hand together to make sure things are running as they need to run. Right. And
Okay.
yeah, and that's important. I mean, as we talk about, building new models at Humonix, we have to make sure that we have all of our ducks in a row and all of our processes are stamped in, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So you almost sound like an unofficial project manager.
Yeah. Sort of. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well,
Yeah.
because you're talking about communicating with stakeholders. You're talking about, getting everyone on board and practically getting signatures. This is how it's going to go, and monitoring throughout and checking in. And,
Hmm.
I like so, from our experience, I mean, I loved the communication because as a scientist, it is hard to give something up and say, I want you to do this, and I trust in, the models that you have, and I trust in your abilities. This is my idea. I'm giving it to you.
Hmm.
And it's a little difficult to do. And so to have a company that will constantly come back, and you would email me, Cynthia, here's what the cells look like today. They're not ready. Okay.
Hmm.
And at
Hmm.
least like you check that off your list and you say, okay, they're there. They look good. And there's just something reassuring from the client perspective to say, like, no, they're still thinking about us. They are
Hmm.
genuinely treating us like partners, and it was always incredibly reassuring and very, very helpful.
Oh, I'm so glad. I'm so glad to hear that. That's
Oh my
that's
gosh.
the goal, right? I mean, and that's the
Yeah.
thing. It's more again, it's just trying to stay on top of everything and make sure that people
Mhm.
understand, you're doing the work that you set out to do, that has been written and, meticulously looked over. Another part of my job I forgot to mention is, just managing the lab as a whole. So just making sure every things are running as they need to run, right? I mean, we have, and my technical team helps with that as well, but just making sure that we're doing what we need to do. I mean, as graduate students, you have um, checks and balances. You have usually an academic support staff who's making sure
Mhm.
that things are doing what they need to do. As a company, you need to be responsible for all of the things. So whether
Sure.
that be CO2 tanks, liquid nitrogen, making sure the incubators are doing what they need to do, because sometimes they also have a mind of their own too.
Yeah.
So and then we
Yes.
all do a little bit of this, is making sure that we're good, everything looks great, and yeah.
Mhm. I love that. Like, yeah, even, the CEO's rolling up her sleeves and, plugging in a new CO2 tank or moving things from one freezer to another, that goes along with that pivoting, like you're talking about,
Absolutely.
having that flexibility.
And doing whatever you need to do that's best for the company and best for us,
Absolutely.
moving forward. And
Mhm.
yeah.
So one of the things that I remember hearing as I was talking about going into industry and thinking about going into industry as a postdoc is I was cautioned that none of my ideas would ever really be mine. you know
Okay.
um like kind of like what you're saying, you work with the client, and certainly at Humonix there's more of a back and forth, but
Right.
some other companies do just tell us what you want us to do. We'll get it all in writing. We can tell you what's feasible and what's not, and maybe we can, maybe they'll contribute a little bit into the experimental design, and particularly with in vivo studies, if you say, I want checks at all these time points, and then the price tag comes back astronomical, then okay, we cut back on a few of those. Like usually it's the budget that'll dictate.
Sure.
Um, but there's always this idea, and again, I was cautioned against this. You know, none of the ideas that you pursue are going to be yours anymore, and they made it sound like, isn't that going to be sad? You know, you're
Oh,
not, you're working on someone else's ideas, and if it doesn't work, then that's that. You know, or if
mhm.
it does work, then you have to hand it back to them, and that's that. And so, I guess, do you feel? I mean, I get the impression that you don't feel that way, but how would you respond to somebody who had that concern?
Yeah, and you know what? That was never said to me. That was
Yeah.
never something I've ever thought about,
Uh-huh.
or had an issue with, because it's been so dynamic and like just, we're constantly talking, okay, let's do this. That's a good idea. That's a good idea. But like a big idea, yeah, that's never something that's come up. And we still will apply for grants, and especially while we're building new things.
Yeah.
Um, and whoever, if that person is their idea, then they're going to be the PI on the grant. Like yeah, we don't have that concern
Okay.
actually. Yeah.
Oh, that's nice. That's
Yeah.
good. Yeah, I mean, in retrospect, I can understand, that you're going to go whichever way the company's going,
Yeah.
So, and I've certainly seen that, in my own experience. It never bothered me as much as, maybe others thought that it might, but I can see if you're a person who likes to see, as you say, something grow from soup to nuts, you
Right.
want to follow this project from start to finish. I mean, of course, if it's a big question, there's never really a finish. You never have an end.
Yep.
You're an experiment is going to open up more questions and maybe answer one little aspect of it, but it's never really ends. But it was just an interesting perspective to me to have someone say, well, but you don't have ownership of your stuff, and
Oh gosh. Yeah.
yeah,
That's very
no,
sad.
I know, right? Like, it's not that bad. It's kind of fun. So I guess, Karen gave us an overview of Humonix, but
Sure.
yeah, maybe let's have you do that. And also let's talk about the models, because you guys, it's all in vitro cell culture models, and remind me, it's like 3D culture and co-culture. And so that takes the in vivo aspect out of it, and it
Mhm.
allows companies to test their compounds in human cells rather than relying on like mouse models, rat models, etc. Like what else?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yep,
please.
absolutely. And I'll just rewind a little bit even further. And when we were graduate students, the PI that we were working under, that was one of her, big things was we're trying to move away from animal. Like this is not necessarily working for everything, right? It doesn't work
Right.
for everything, and it costs a lot of money, and there's all this, and it's inhumane and things like that. And so
Hmm.
what I was working on as a graduate student was very similar. We're trying to make this model of brown fat cell. It was very exciting. And Karen was working on similar things as well. And so, really, the genesis of the company was 95% or 90% is failing in the clinic for, glaucoma. Okay, we
Yes.
need a better model, right? That was really the genesis, and you've heard that story a few times now. And then it sort of has transformed into, okay, well, we can culture an effective, 3D trabecular meshwork, Schlemm canal, co-culture. And we've shown that we can disease the tissue and we can simulate, a glaucoma-like state, right?
Hmm.
And we can treat it with various compounds, and we have endpoints that we can see. We can look at pressure changes and things like that. Okay, what else? Wait a minute, we can use this for some other things as well, because there are other disease states that are fibrotic, and there are other disease states that we could get the cells, right? They make the
Right.
cells, we could just buy them, and can
Hmm.
we wait a minute, we could do this. So it's really been sort of this like, do they really need you know a person or an animal for another particular disease state? And initially when we were first going to conferences, a lot of people were like, okay, this is great, this is the front of the eye, but what about the back? What about the back of the eye? Because there's a lot of problems back there, and it's very complicated. So what about
Yes.
that? And we just kept hearing over and over, what about the back of the eye? What about the back of the eye? And it's funny because I have a friend who, had a chicken pox on her optic nerve. So she's always said, can you get me I can't see. She can't see out of the eye. Yeah. So
No
she's like,
way.
yeah, I know. My friend, since she was a kid, she cannot see out of her left eye. So you have to be mindful of which side you're on. It's a whole thing. And she's like,
I've
are
heard
you, yeah, I know, probably super
that.
rare. Yeah. Um,
Yeah. Oh.
and so hey, are you guys doing anything, could you help me? Can you help my optic nerve?
Mhm.
So that was really the push for us to start looking into the back of the eye, right? Which,
Yeah.
as you know, is very complicated. There's so many moving parts there.
Yeah.
And to say the least. So
Andrea, I think, is probably a bioengineer's dream.
yeah,
The ultrastructure of the retina.
probably. Absolutely. Yeah, a lot of interdisciplinary things at work there for sure. Um,
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so that's kind of how we moved into that space.
Mhm.
Can we take what we know from the front of the eye? How can we apply it to the back? And there's been a lot of uh, really a lot of learning and a lot of growing with that. Um, and then in terms of other models, we've got some preliminary things happening with some other models. I'm not sure what I can and cannot say here, but um, it's really just about using what we know and how can we apply it. And I've been to some conferences, is particularly like 3D, tissue or 3D technology summits, and
Mhm.
you've got a lot of different camps there, right? You've got the camps of, well, you need a whole person for toxicology. You need a whole person. Sure. Okay. Understood.
Mhm.
Beyond the
Yeah.
tox part, in terms of like just studying the actual tissue and studying what works and mechanism of action. Because a lot of times, and I'm sure you knew this as an MSL, drugs work. How do they work? Right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Really.
Uh-oh. So,
Yeah.
so that's really like an important piece for us. I mean, we can really
For
come in
sure.
there and help. So, and
Mhm.
then you've got other camps that are like, well, it's never going to be as good as the whole organ. You need the whole organ, and not the whole person, but you just need that organ. And as long as you can get enough of those tissues, which who
Mhm.
can, right? So I think that we kind of realize what we're good at, and we kind of just feel like we fit and we can fit, particularly with the alternative methods, because a lot of times people have come to us before they've gone into the clinic. Hey, we have this idea, does this thing work or not? Can you just give us some information? But we also have had people come back, hey, we've got this approved drug, it works, we don't know how it works, can you help
Yeah.
us with that? So I know that's like kind of a long answer, but I really think that it's been a very organic process, and it's been us using our talents to the best of our ability, and again, just working as a team and coming up with an interdisciplinary approach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I still see your name on papers and posters, and
Hmm.
you're still out there doing the conference circuit and getting
Hmm.
published. So that's always exciting too.
It is always exciting, and I'm so happy to be a part of all of that as well. I think that's really important, again, keeping yourself well rounded in that way.
Absolutely. And I agree that, especially in when you're using animal models, you're using mice, you're using rats, those tissues are small in a human. They're even smaller
Yeah.
in rats and mice. So trying to isolate tissues and see what's been upregulated or downregulated in a particular, either with your treatment of choice or with a vehicle. I remember hearing Karen talk about the model that she built of the outflow pathway, and just thinking like this is going to change the game,
Hmm.
because it really, not only does it mimic, the in vivo state, and you can see the same results in humans and actual human patients as you see in the 3D culture models. I mean, it was very, very exciting. And I think now, especially with 3D printing and talking about 3D printing human heart valves and all kinds
Right.
of other really neat things. I mean, I think we are starting to move past. Nothing's ever going to compare to having an actual, like you say, for tox, for pharmacokinetics, for
Right.
everything else, you still need live animals. But it does seem like, especially in the preclinical phase, way to save money, way to save time. This just is a much better approach, and it's definitely cheaper and less high maintenance and less smelly. I would imagine a lot less smelly.
Absolutely. Exactly. Right.
So don't bite.
Absolutely.
So I guess for our last few minutes, I want to talk to you. We were talking before. You mentioned your volunteer work and how much you enjoyed volunteering. I saw on your LinkedIn profile you did a lot of STEM education
I did.
for young people, and one of the things. So there's a reason why Bench to Boardroom is, hosted by women, and so far all of my guests have been women. And Humonix obviously is this, kick-ass company run by women, and I love that for you guys. Um, Mainly because I didn't want to hear another podcast with another man talking about his ascension from
Mm-hmm.
academics to industry, because that story has been told 6 ways to Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
And there are considerations for us then that are completely different from them,
Mm-hmm.
so when you think about, so it's, I was interested in that, how STEM education was very important to you.
Yes.
And so uh are you still volunteering and doing things like that now, or how do you encourage young people to pursue careers in STEM, particularly young women?
I don't get to do as much of that now, unfortunately. I am always open to it. And so sometimes we'll get, opportunities to go speak to high schools or, try to bring them here, see what
Uh-huh.
we're actually doing. So we do try to do that as much as we can. And I think it's really important too. And it's interesting because kids inherently, mostly, they do science all the time. They're like citizen scientists.
True.
It's when they get to school and the way that it's taught and the way that it's kind of explained, because not every kid learns the same. So they kind of start to lose it a little bit.
Yeah.
And so what we used to do when I was a graduate student is we would have these after school programs, and we would go in, and mostly inner city, and just
Mhm.
do science with them, because
Yeah.
it at the end of it, like, they realize they're doing science without even like knowing. I don't know. So, a lot of times it was things like we would get chicken thighs from the grocery store, or like a whole chicken leg, and like dissect the
Mhm.
chicken leg
Ah.
because you can. And
Yeah.
one kid was like, forgot that he was at school, so it's like,
Aw.
I feel like, we are born with this inherent interest, and we're interested in all the things, and then it kind of gets dampered down. But for women in particular, absolutely. I mean, I remember being one of the only girls in my class at grad school and being like, oh my God, like, yeah. And I remember
Mhm.
hearing the boys be like, oh, I haven't seen a girl in a while in class. And it's like, okay, well, I just try to encourage all young people, but especially girls, like, just, pursue your interests. Don't be afraid, like, what anybody's thinking about you, just be interested in what
Mhm.
you're interested in, and just trying to expose them to more things. And I feel like the more that they see, and the more they see examples, the more they are likely to pursue. And on some of the graduate students that I've spoken with, over the last few years, they're all women, and it's wonderful.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And and I'll go back to what you said about, the leap of faith, going
Hmm.
into this, nanoscale engineering program, I mean, no, but I love that, because especially for women, I think there's so much paralysis by analysis,
Hmm.
and so much that we struggle with in terms of imposter syndrome. And I mean, I tell the story all the time. I will never go, even though I love lifting weights. But if I go into the gym, I will never go to like the testosterone infused corner
Hmm.
of the
Yep.
gym with like the grunting men. Like, nope. It's like a force field. I will not penetrate that force field. I'll go to where like they have the multicolored weights, and I'll just do it there,
Yep.
because it seems like a much more open and welcoming environment. And I feel like in a lot of ways, a lot of these fields are still stuck in that very masculine environment, and it can feel like a
Hmm.
force field to try to puncture through and make it work. And so I love hearing stories like yours where you say, I mean, I took a chance. This was a really cool spaceship looking building, and I knew that I loved this, and then I learned the rest.
Yep.
And that's phenomenal.
Thanks, Cynthia.
Really
Thanks.
cool. So, I mean, we can leave it there. Or what other words of encouragement would you have? How can people find you on LinkedIn, or how can they find Humonix?
Oh,
Yeah,
absolutely.
any closing words.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find Humonix on LinkedIn. I am also on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram. I'm not sure, if that's helpful. I just want people to realize, you don't have to be pigeonholed. And I'm sure we've heard this same speech a million times, but just kind of like follow your path. I mean, I'm a planner actually. I do love planning, but the way that I've gotten to where I've gotten is because I didn't plan. I just kind of kept following these, like, I would say like little like breadcrumbs. And I just kept going after the breadcrumbs, and I am where I am now, and I'm just kind of seeing how things go, and don't get so caught up on like, well, hey, like the what ifs and oh, I have to do X, Y, and Z. Have goals, but also be flexible with yourself as a person, because you will change and you will evolve.
I love that. That is absolutely right. And scientists especially, we do love to plan.
We do, and that's the thing. And we really love to plan, and we also have to learn, to let go at times too. And Humonix has been a great environment for me, because we have a really great, again, I keep using the word dynamic. I don't know what other word to use. It's just a really great environment and a very flexible environment, and everybody working together. So I'm very fortunate to have led my trail of breadcrumbs have led me here. So yeah.
I love that. This has been wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Andrea Unser, for joining us today. And it was wonderful to see you.
Always good to see you, Cynthia. Please don't be a stranger.
Oh, absolutely.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.
Take care.
I want to thank Dr. Andrea Unser once again for joining me today. It was an absolute delight to talk to her. Remember, you can find Humonix Biosciences, that's spelled Humonix Biosciences, on LinkedIn. You can find Andrea on LinkedIn. And of course, contact me on LinkedIn or on Instagram with any questions or ideas you have for future episodes. Otherwise, happy Women's History Month, everyone.